Android 17 is here, and it is time to see which operating system now looks better. From left to right, we have HyperOS on Xiaomi 17 Ultra, One UI 8.5 on Galaxy S26 Ultra, Pixel Android 17 Beta on Google Pixel 10 Pro XL, iOS 26 Liquid Glass on iPhone 17 Pro Max, ColorOS on Oppo Find X9 Ultra, and OriginOS on Vivo X300 Ultra. All phones except iPhone are running on Android operating system with their own flavor on top. Let's start by opening the Spotify app. On Xiaomi, you can click on the search button and search for your app similar to iOS. On One UI, you have to swipe up and then search for it. The same goes for Android 17 on Pixel. On iOS, you can use the search button to find your app. Oppo's ColorOS also implemented the search button, which made it look more similar to iOS. And for Vivo, you have to swipe up to search for the app. Now, if you have minimized the app by the universal gesture of swiping up from the bottom of the screen, on almost all of the phones, you will have a version of a dynamic island, as we know on iPhone. The exceptions are on One UI, where you have a floating bar that goes on the left side, and Pixel Android doesn't do this at all. You can then click on the bar on the island to open the small music bar. In the case of Pixel, you can swipe down to see the music playing. On iOS, you have to hold the dynamic island. Each has a slightly different visualization of the Spotify app, and OriginOS even went ahead and added an animation on top. For opening the recent apps, they all have a universal gesture of swiping from the bottom up and holding for a second. The implementation of recent apps is more similar than ever. HyperOS and One UI show the apps on top of each other by default now. Android Pixel is slightly different, and panels are next to each other instead of being on top. iOS is also similar to HyperOS and One UI, or rather, iOS was first to implement this way. And of course, the other two Android phones also implemented it similar to iOS. Even the position of icons on top of each panel is almost identical to iOS. The only difference is that all Android phones have a close all or cross button to let you close all apps simultaneously, all except Pixel. To close the recent apps, you have to swipe up again. Now let's see how opening app animation works. On HyperOS, the app window starts from the center and gradually opens and creeps into the whole screen. The same behavior and animation are on One UI and then on Pixel Android. iOS is a bit different, and the window opens in a 3D shape, popping from top to bottom. On ColorOS and OriginOS, it works similar to other Android phones and opens from the center and fills the whole screen. When minimizing the app, each phone has a slightly different animation, like some do blur the icons or move things a bit and zooming in and out. But in principle, they all put the window back to the icon on the main screen. For the notification, you can swipe from the left side to access it. If you swipe from the top right side on each phone, you will go to the quick settings. The only exception is Pixel Android, where you have to swipe down twice. And you probably notice all Chinese phones are almost a one-to-one copy of iOS. HyperOS has a bit of its own thing going though, but ColorOS and OriginOS are not even trying to hide it. One UI is a bit different, and Pixel Android is the only one here that stands out. You can access the most important settings there, like changing the brightness of your phone, and they all single out the brightness settings when you click on it. You can also, of course, edit the quick settings by clicking on the Edit button on Android phones and by holding down an empty place on iOS. Another thing that looks more similar than ever on the phones is the widgets. You can of course select the widgets you want from the widget list, which are called differently on each system. If you look at the weather widget, they all look kind of similar with rounded corners. The only exception is again Android Pixel with a totally different widget look and feel. Opening the weather app, HyperOS, iOS, ColorOS, and OriginOS are more or less similar. One UI has a bit of a different vibe, especially with the character on it, and Pixel is the black sheep, but in a good way. All of these phones are absolutely packed with AI tools. For example, looking at the gallery or photo apps, on Xiaomi you click on the adjust button and apply AI beautification. Not surprisingly, it doesn't do anything to Maria herself, but the background becomes a bit more lit. Galaxy AI styles are another level. For example, you can make a studio version if you need a LinkedIn photo, or you can make yourself into a K-pop character. Google Photos apps has this enhancing feature too that upscales the image, and I find it very useful, especially for zoom pictures. iOS is the weakest when it comes to generative AI, and generally AI tools, and Apple lags behind. It does have this Magic Enhance tool, but it does seem to me that it uses generic image processing tools to change the photo a bit. Especially like the implementation of Oppo's ColorOS, where it gives you suggestions to improve the photo, for example, by adding a studio light. One UI also have this feature hidden somewhere, but on ColorOS it is more accessible. Also, it has an enhanced quality option that upscales the photo, and the photo will look absolutely stunning but also AI generated at the same time. OriginOS also has a beautification generating AI tool on its photo gallery app, which here adds a bit of makeup to Maria's face. If you press the power button for a second or two, they all also connect to their own version of AI, which depending on your region would be different, but in the Western world, it would be mostly Google Gemini. And you can ask simple questions like how the weather is or ask them to do more complicated tasks. I find it very useful when I am driving. Android phones are generally more feature-packed and still have some features that iOS lacks. For example, you can have a split screen for apps, which is super useful. Fortunately, on all phones now, you can see the small windows, which is called picture-in-picture on iOS. Previously, iOS didn't have this feature, or at least it was not available in my region. I use both Android and iOS on a daily basis, and there are still some things that bother me on iOS, like the lack of a universal back gesture, and the fact that going back works differently on each app, and even the screens of the same app. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite version of Android is and if you prefer iOS. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to see future more in-depth comparisons, as this video was focusing more on look and feel rather than an in-depth comparison. If you want to see how the cameras of these phones compare to each other, watch this video next. Thanks for tuning into Tecmo, and I will see you in the next one.